Earlier in the week, my husband asked, "Did you hear that Carolyn Maloney was arrested for protesting outside the Supreme Court?" And I hadn't. She was joined by other Congresswomen, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Barbara Lee, Ayanna Pressley, Jackie Speier, arrested, fined, and released. And to be fair, they had received this very warning beforehand 3 different times. You're blocking the road. That was the narrative from Washington on Tuesday as 17 members of Congress joined dozens of others seated outside the recently barricaded Supreme Court to protest the Alito decision which eviscerated Roe v. Wade. Yes, they blocked the road while carrying banners which read, "Our bodies, our courts, our democracy." At the same time, they chanted, "We will not go back." Some of the people protesting had been at the original pro-choice rallies 50 years ago, and neither they nor any of the women assembled were ready to go back. These women used their bodies, the same bodies that had been rendered less than equal by the Alito decision, to block the road in order to speak new and painful truths to power. In truth, they weren't blocking the road to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was blocking the path to equal justice under the law by removing their bodily autonomy. As John Lewis taught us, Tuesday's protest was some good trouble. In the face of the Dobbs decision, I want to go back to our Torah portion, Pinchas, to speak about a different ruling also involving women's rights. In fact, it is a remarkable ruling made for 5 daughters of a man named Salafachad. Unlike so many places in Jewish texts, these women are known by their own names, and I want to honor their efforts by reintroducing them to you. They are Mahla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. In a time when most women were often recorded by their relationship to the men in their lives, they were the mother of, the wife of, the child of, the sister of. Seeing their names actually recorded in the text, well, that is thrilling. It gives them a dimensionality that was overlooked in much of Jewish life. And at the same time, it telegraphs to us, the reader, how much they were valued and how important they were then and still are now. The Torah records this exchange about their inability to inherit their father's land because, well, they were women. The sisters appealed to Moses, explaining their circumstances. Our father died in the wilderness. He wasn't part of Korach's faction, which banded against God. He simply died and left no sons. Why should our father's name and his land be lost simply because he had no sons? These women were trailblazers, and Moses, as he did with most difficult things, brought the case to God. And this is what God said. The plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You should give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's shares to them. God's ruling that women could inherit in the absence of male heirs was earth-shaking, elevating their status. Our tradition takes pains to explain why this ruling is appropriate. One explanation notes that the women petitioned the many authorities, from the assembly to the chieftains to Eleazar, who was then acting priest, and then Moses, bringing their request to each successively higher authority, their dedication to the process, to following the rules, because we know that girls are supposed to follow the rules. That was key to facilitating a receptive response. In the same Talmudic passage, another sage notes that the sisters approached Moses just as he was explaining a complicated passage about the responsibilities of levirate marriage, which deals with raising a child in the name of someone who has died, so their legacy endures. And in this context, the sisters' unique request had resonance. Surely, the sages reasoned, their father's legacy needed to be protected and passed on to the next generation. But the ancient teaching, which speaks to the very moment in which we live, reads as follows. When the daughters of Zelophehad heard that the land was being divided among the tribes, but not among the women, they convened to discuss the matter. They said, God's mercy and compassion is not like the compassion of humankind. Humankind favors men over women. God is not like that. God's compassion extends to men and women alike. Listen again. Humankind favors men over women. God is not like that. And that is why they wanted to be sure that Moses brought their request directly to God, to ensure that they would not be subjected to discrimination. Gender equity just was not a priority for Moses. It wasn't even in his vocabulary. But God played by different, more progressive rules. And to be clear, had the women not brought this request to Moses, he would not have even known about it. But the sisters, Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, had a lot invested in the perpetuation of their father's legacy because it was tied up with their very identity and their future. And while we can't make assumptions about whether or not their concern was important to Moses, what is obvious is that justice cannot be achieved if women are silent, and if the power keepers, the ones who make the decisions, are unaware that there is a problem. Rabbi Sylvia Rothschild frames this well. She writes, what we do not notice, we do not value. And what we do not value, we do not notice. To say it more simply, we can't consider what we don't see. It took a pandemic to uncover the hidden labor of essential frontline workers, of an infrastructure that protected some and exploited others, of racial inequities which were perpetuated because they were unseen, and now of the unfairness of the Dobbs decision, the spectacle of a 10-year-old rape victim who could not receive essential health care in her own state and was forced to travel to receive a safe and legal abortion is eye-opening. Once you see something, it cannot be ignored. And once your eyes have been opened, there is no excuse, no hiding behind a veil of ignorance in this post-Roe world. We have a lot to learn from others who are still struggling to gain an equal place in society. A telling example is found in the disability rights movement, where being overlooked and discounted is a daily experience. Those who are differently abled regularly confront prejudice that their differences impair their ability to have or express an opinion, nor are they afforded the dignity of being offered a role in decision-making. And one of their mottos is instructive for us in this fraught historic moment about reproductive rights. It reads, "Nothing about us without us." And those few words communicate a universal truth, that decisions need to rest with those who have to abide by them. Could there be a more important truth for women today and all who care about them? About us. So let us return to that protest outside the Supreme Court when 17 Congress women were arrested. If you want to know what those women were doing blocking the road, they were carrying on a tradition of women speaking truth to power, which began in today's parasha. They were calling on the wisdom of Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah to speak up, so they didn't have to wait patiently to be noticed, to inform the power keepers of their error, to question the injustice of the post-Roe status quo, because those in positions of authority, the SCOTUS, need to know that inequality does not suit us. Those women were hearkening back to a time when, in the words of Letty Cotton Pogrobin, co-founder of Ms. Magazine, when protests led to action, led to reaction, and people changed, and things changed, and institutions responded. The women blocking the road were using what they learned from living the last half-century as equal partners in democracy, with privacy, bodily autonomy, and equal protection as part of their uncontested rights. Those women still believe that the long overdue promise of gender equity is still worth blocking the road for, because they simply will not go back. And their assertion, that faith, is the path to a better future. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so.